Number 24. Thabo Bester and Nandifa Magudumana, a notorious South African convict and con artist named Thabo Bester, was serving a 75-year prison sentence for assaulting and murdering women when charred human remains were found in his cell in May of 2022. For an entire year, investigators believed the remains belonged to Bester. They only began to suspect otherwise after law enforcement received reports that the supposedly dead prisoner was seen alive and well in Johannesburg, along with information from numerous women claiming that Bester had contacted them on social media. A secondary investigation was launched, leading to the discovery that the burned remains did not belong to Bester after all. DNA tests confirmed that the body belonged to another missing convict who vanished shortly before the remains were found in Bester's cell. In a complex escape plan involving several moving parts and multiple co-conspirators, someone had claimed the body from a local morgue and smuggled it into the prison. In a TV cabinet, the decoy body was burned and left in Bester's cell while he escaped wearing a warden's uniform, and a fake funeral was held for the person the stolen body belonged to. Police exhumed the grave and discovered that the casket was filled with sacks of corn maize. In the meantime, detectives uncovered records detailing the movements of the car that transported the body to the prison, where Bester bribed a technician to disable the surveillance cameras prior to pulling off his escape. Knowing that Bester had gotten a year-long head start on his flight from justice, authorities urged the public to keep an eye out for the fugitive and offered a generous reward in exchange for information leading to his capture. Shortly thereafter, he was apprehended in Tanzania with his partner, celebrity doctor Nandifa Magudumana. Bester had an American passport in his possession under the name Tom Williams Kelly and had no South African identification, owing to the fact that he had never been documented as a citizen of the country despite being born there. Initially, following Bester's escape, he and Magudumana had lived in a luxurious rented mansion in the wealthy Johannesburg suburb of Hyde Park. The couple ran a scam property company and took several deposits from unsuspecting clients for construction projects that were never completed. After being arrested in Tanzania, they were extradited to South Africa, where they both faced charges in connection with the escape, along with 8 alleged co-conspirators. According to the most recent available updates on the case, Bester and Magudumana are currently awaiting trial amid ongoing delays. Number 23. Justin Green and Brooke Pullin. On a July morning in 2023, the lifeless body of 44-year-old Darrell Vincent Lee was found along a roadside in East Wheatfield, Pennsylvania. He had succumbed to a single gunshot wound, and his death was ruled a homicide. Evidence at the scene, including a multicolored strand of hair, led investigators to Lee's landscaping employee, 41-year-old Justin Allen Green, and Green's girlfriend, 30-year-old Brooke Ashley Pullin. During questioning, Green claimed that he had dropped Lee off at his home after working together the day before Lee's body was found. Detectives continued to uncover evidence that suggested otherwise, including surveillance video which conflicted with Green's account of events. In the meantime, Pullin, who had multicolored hair matching the strand that was found with Lee's body, told interrogators that she and Green took a road trip to Maryland after Green returned home from work on the afternoon in question. She claimed that they returned to the residence later that evening, but detectives were unconvinced by her story. During a search of the couple's vehicle, police found even more evidence pointing toward their involvement, including blood, shotgun shells, and a Visa card belonging to Lee, according to court documents. Green eventually confessed to shooting Lee with a 12-gauge shotgun after driving his boss to collect money from a landscaping customer. He then covered Lee's body up with clothing and other items and picked Pullin up, but claimed that she had no knowledge of the killing despite the body being in the front seat of his truck. Green was detained without bail on charges of criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, robbery, tampering with evidence, false identification to law enforcement, and receiving stolen property. Pullin was held on suspicion of tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, receiving stolen property, and false identification to law enforcement, with bond set at $150,000. Their case appears to be ongoing. Number 22. Diego Uribe and Japheth Ramos. in an unspeakable act of violence that occurred in February of 2016. A young Chicago man named Diego Uribe murdered 6 members of his family at their bungalow in the city's Gage Park neighborhood while his girlfriend, Japheth Ramos, looked on. According to prosecutors, Uribe fatally shot his 38-year-old aunt, Maria Martinez, during a robbery gone wrong at the residence. He proceeded to fatally stab and beat the other 5 victims, including Martinez's brother, parents, and children, in a bid to eliminate any potential witnesses to the botched crime. Uribe and Ramos made off with an Xbox, a piggy bank, some jewelry, and $250 in cash. 3 months later, the pair were arrested in connection with the horrific slayings. Ramos claimed that she and Uribe were on their way home from a medical appointment when Uribe told her that they had to stop at his aunt's house, where he had a job to do. While en route to the residence, Uribe announced his plan to kill the victims and showed Ramos a gun, but she didn't think he was serious. The family was just sitting down for dinner when the couple arrived at the home. They offered some food to Uribe and Ramos, but Uribe told Martinez that he had to talk to her, and they went upstairs with Ramos following closely behind. Once they were out of sight of the rest of the family, Uribe ordered Martinez to hand over all the cash inside the residence. Martinez initially laughed, but quickly realized that her nephew was serious. She grabbed the gun and tried wrestling it away from Uribe, who shot her repeatedly. As concerned family members made their way upstairs to see what was going on, Uribe methodically attacked each and every one of them, killing them at the scene. Several of the victims pleaded for their lives as their loved one mercilessly bludgeoned and stabbed them to death. In 2022, Ramos pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of armed robbery and received a 25-year prison sentence in exchange for her testimony against Uribe. During Uribe's trial, his defense attorney argued that there was no way her client could have committed all 6 murders on his own. She claimed that the killings were carried out by 4 masked intruders and that Uribe had been too scared to speak up about it, but the jury was unswayed and Uribe was convicted on all counts, landing him a life sentence without parole. Number 21. Mark Needell and Emily Lowe. In June of 2018, a New Jersey couple was accused of robbing a jewelry store owner and his son at gunpoint in Wayne Township. According to law enforcement, 30-year-old Mark Needell and 34-year-old Emily Lowe entered the business shortly after 11 in the morning and announced that they were committing a hold-up while Needell pointed a gun at the victims. Needell got into a scuffle with the store owners, who were assaulted with pepper spray at some point during the altercation. Police officers arrived to find the victims struggling with Lowe on the sidewalk, by which point Needell had fled the scene. While taking Lowe into custody, an officer found zip ties in her pocket, leading to the suspicion that she and Needell were planning to bind the victims' wrists before the robbery went awry. Needell was arrested a short while later at Newark International Airport as he waited aboard a flight to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The suspects were charged with aggravated assault with a weapon, robbery with injuries, and possession of a weapon, and Needell faced an additional conspiracy charge. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 20. Charlie Perez and Yelena Sepulveda. In February of 2024, a young couple robbed a Lowe's hardware store in Cape Coral, Florida, at gunpoint while wearing matching pajama pants featuring the Sesame Street character Cookie Monster. Later identified as 22-year-old Charlie Jorge Perez and 19-year-old Yelena Annalise Sepulveda. The accused thieves were spotted trying to leave the store with unpaid merchandise. They were stopped by the store's loss prevention team. Perez allegedly flashed a gun in his waistband and made threats while Sepulveda spat on the employees. The couple fled the scene, prompting law enforcement to release surveillance images of the pair in hopes that members of the public would help identify them. Police arrested the fugitives on suspicion of robbery the following day and carried out a search warrant at the couple's home, where they found 4 caged French bulldogs living in deplorable conditions. In addition to languishing in feces and urine, the dogs were suffering from open sores and a severe skin condition called mange. According to a witness, the pups had not been out of their cage in at least 4 months. All 4 of the French bulldogs, along with 3 other dogs and 3 cats, were seized from the home. Following the search, Perez and Sepulveda were each hit with 4 counts of animal cruelty in addition to the charges they were already facing in connection with the Lowe's robbery. The case appears to be ongoing. Number 19. Brandon Scary and Kayla Pruitt. In June of 2024, law enforcement put an alert out to the public about an armed and dangerous West Virginia couple who were accused of robbing a First National Bank in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. According to police, surveillance footage showed 29-year-old Brandon D. Scary and 28-year-old Kayla Pruitt retrieving a piece of paper from a Wendy's restaurant prior to the robbery. It was believed to be the same piece of paper that Scary handed to a bank teller, which contained a handwritten demand for cash and a message claiming that he had a gun, although he did not brandish a firearm during the robbery. After the robbery, the thieves used some of the $7,000 that they made off with to buy items at a Walgreens store. They then treated themselves to lunch at a nearby KFC restaurant, but by the time authorities identified the suspects as Scary and Pruitt, the couple had fled the area and were nowhere to be found. Less than 10 days later, the pair were apprehended just north of New York City, in Ardsley, New York. They were accused of committing at least 2 additional bank robberies during their time on the run, including at a Chase Bank in Ardsley where they made off with $16,000 in cash. During another robbery at a bank in Washington City, Pennsylvania, a man identified by investigators as Scary handed the teller a note stating that he had a gun along with a warning not to make him come over the counter. The suspect took the employees' cell phones and forced them into a bathroom at gunpoint, but only managed to steal $155 because the money drawers and vault were locked. Scary is also the prime suspect in a home invasion in Hastings on Hudson. According to police, he entered the victim's residence at 4:30 in the morning with a stolen handgun and tied up the homeowner, then proceeded to steal nearly $4,000 worth of jewelry and cash. Following the couple's capture, Scary was charged with a laundry list of crimes including first-degree robbery, first-degree burglary, second-degree criminal possession of a weapon, third-degree criminal possession of stolen property, and third-degree grand larceny. Pruitt is also facing multiple felony charges in connection with the robbery in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. The outcomes of their cases remain to be seen. Number 18. Turquoise Deshae Noble and Anaya Marie Edmondson. Shortly before noon one morning in June of 2018, a pair of masked thieves robbed a BBVA Compass Bank branch in Jacksonville, Florida. At gunpoint, covered in black clothing from head to toe, the suspects took $80,000 in cash from a customer along with an undisclosed amount of money from the bank's tellers. The robbers fled the scene in a Ford Fusion and drove to an apartment complex where they swapped the getaway car out for a Chrysler 200. After showing signs of deception during a polygraph, the bank's lead teller, 21-year-old Anaya Marie Edmondson, reportedly admitted to being involved in the robbery and shared details about the planning of the crime with detectives. She implicated her boyfriend, 28-year-old Turquoise Deshae Noble, and they were both charged with armed robbery. Records show that Noble is serving a 30-year prison sentence for 2 counts of robbery with a deadly weapon. He's slated to be released in 2047 at the age of 56. Edmondson served a 2-year prison sentence for 1 count of robbery with a deadly weapon and was released from custody in 2021. Number 17. John and Crystal Kincaid. In April of 2021, 38-year-old John Kincaid and his 37-year-old wife, Crystal Kincaid, were accused of hurling racial slurs at an interracial couple during a road rage attack in Richland County, South Carolina. According to reports, the Kincaids cut off Eleanor Vorter and her boyfriend, Bron Cornett, at a red light, then motioned for the young couple to pull into a nearby Dollar General parking lot. Vorter later told police that John Kincaid approached her and Cornett's vehicle and kicked it while shouting racial insults, leaving a dent in the door. When Cornett exited the vehicle and tried to take a photo of the Kincaid's license plate, John allegedly knocked him onto the ground. Crystal Kincaid was accused of attacking Vorter when she tried to defend Cornett, and the suspects fled the scene with the victims' phones. The attack was partially captured on camera by witnesses who called the police and followed the Kincaid's car. About a mile down the road from the Dollar General, Crystal was seen exiting the vehicle and running into a wooded area. In the meantime, both victims were taken to the hospital, where Cornett was treated for major injuries while Vorta received treatment for minor wounds. A few days after the attack, Cornett told ABC 13 that the treatment he received from the Kincaids felt like a hate crime, and that the suspects seemed like full-blown racists. He offered additional details about the assault, including the allegation that John Kincaid put Vorta in a chokehold when Crystal was unable to pry the young woman's phone out of her hands. Law enforcement soon caught up with the Kincaids, who were booked into jail on 2 counts of robbery and 2 counts of first-degree assault and battery. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 16. Dandrew Pittman and Giselle Jaquez Guadalupe on what began as a normal afternoon at a Speedway gas station in West Allis, Wisconsin, in August of 2022. A man approached the clerk with some items as if he was about to pay for them and robbed the store at gunpoint. He fled the scene in a vehicle with a little over $200 in stolen money. More than 8 hours later, the same man entered another Speedway store in West Allis and asked to prepay for $1 worth of gas. As he handed 4 quarters to the clerk, he revealed what looked like a gun wrapped in a plastic bag from inside his hoodie and demanded all the money from the cash register. He once again made off with just over $200, leaving the scene in the same getaway car that was involved in the first robbery. Keen-eyed detectives noticed distinct features on the car in surveillance footage and were able to trace the vehicle to a local dealership, where they learned that it had been purchased by a 22-year-old woman named Giselle Jaquez Guadalupe. Records reveal that Jaquez Guadalupe had recently been involved in a domestic incident with 25-year-old Dandrew Pittman, who was identified as the thief who robbed the Speedway stores. Pittman was charged with 2 counts of armed robbery and 2 counts of bail jumping as a habitual offender, while Jaquez Guadalupe faced 1 count each of recklessly endangering safety, fleeing or eluding, and obstructing an officer. Records show that Pittman pleaded guilty to armed robbery and is currently serving a 3 to 7 year prison sentence, which will be followed by up to 4 years of supervised release. In early 2024, Jaquez Guadalupe pleaded guilty to 3 misdemeanors and was sentenced to a year of probation. Number 15. Daniel Gray and Neki Lease. In January of 2023, a male victim was robbed and shot in broad daylight in North Lauderdale, Florida, while meeting with a young couple for a transaction. According to law enforcement, the victim was shot by 20-year-old Daniel Gray while sitting in a car that was being driven by Gray's girlfriend, 18-year-old Neki Lease. He managed to flee from the vehicle and was airlifted to the hospital in critical condition. Later that day, Lease falsely reported her car stolen in an apparent attempt to disassociate herself and Gray from the crime. She confessed to making the phony report when questioned by detectives and was booked into the Palm Beach County Jail while authorities searched for Gray. He was apprehended the following day on charges of attempted first-degree murder, robbery with a firearm, and multiple probation violation counts. Records show that Liz is not currently in custody or on probation. Gray, on the other hand, was convicted of several crimes in connection with the shooting. He's serving multiple concurrent sentences for convictions stemming from crimes dating back to 2020, including grand theft of a motor vehicle, grand theft, burglary of an unoccupied structure, 3 counts of credit card fraud, 2 gun charges, robbery with a deadly weapon, and aggravated assault. His release date is scheduled for late October of 2031. Number 14. Maurice Allen and Christina Colenda. In November of 2023, 32-year-old Maurice Allen and 26-year-old Christina Colenda were arrested in Philadelphia in connection with a string of 5 armed robberies that had occurred in the city over a 3-month period. The crime spree reportedly began with the robbery of an individual in public in August, followed by robberies of an ice cream shop, a Dunkin' Donuts cafe, and 2 nail salons. According to prosecutors, the couple committed most of the crimes while dressed head-to-toe in traditional Muslim garb. Allen and Colenda made off with thousands of dollars along with personal wallets belonging to workers at some of the businesses. During one of the nail salon robberies, a 43-year-old employee was shot in the calf and foot, resulting in serious injuries that left her walking on crutches for more than a month afterward. Using license plate reading and surveillance technology, detectives identified Kolenda as the owner of the getaway vehicle that was used in the nail salon robberies. Further investigation led to the identification of Allen as Kolenda's alleged co-conspirator, leading to the pair's arrest on suspicion of robbery, conspiracy, aggravated assault, gun charges, and other crimes. During a search of Allen's home, police found a .40 caliber gun matching the shell casings from one of the robberies, along with clothing matching the description of the thieves' attire. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 13. Kai Shelton and Becca Rosenberg. In October of 2019, authorities in Yakima County, Washington, issued warrants for the arrest of 32-year-old Kai M. Shelton and his partner, 33-year-old Becca Rosenberg, in connection with the robbery of a campsite in Coulee City several weeks earlier. According to law enforcement, there were several children in the couple's minivan at the time of the robbery. The crime took an unexpected turn when the campsite's occupants returned to find the couple and 3 other suspects trying to steal their portable generator. A struggle ensued and one of the thieves struck another one of the suspects with his Buick as he fled the scene, leaving the young man with a broken leg. More than a month after the robbery, police found Shelton and Rosenberg while conducting a search warrant at a house outside Moxie, where they were looking for a fugitive who was wanted for an unrelated crime. Shelton was found curled up inside a dryer, and Rosenberg was located nearby in the laundry room. Authorities charged Shelton with second-degree robbery, theft, and assault, while Rosenberg was charged with second-degree robbery, theft, 2 counts of second-degree assault, and 4 counts of reckless endangerment. In August of 2020, Rosenberg pleaded guilty to the robbery, assault, and endangerment charges. She was sentenced to 17 months in prison. In April of 2021, Shelton entered an offered plea to robbery, assault, and reckless endangerment and was sentenced to a little over 5 years in prison. The couple's 3 co-conspirators received sentences of 9 months, 5.5 years, and just over 6 years. Number 12. Curtis DeWitt and Megan Lillo, an Ohio couple in their 20s named Curtis DeWitt and Megan Lillo, first gained national media attention when they were featured on the Dr. Phil show for domestic abuse. They made news headlines again in 2009 when they were accused of robbing a Norwalk area pharmacy at knife point. DeWitt carried out the robbery while Lillo waited outside in a getaway car. The couple made off with hundreds of OxyContin pills, but it wasn't long before they were identified as the suspects in the crime, considering the fact that DeWitt was wearing an ankle monitor for burglarizing a military veteran's home. According to court documents, DeWitt's brother helped police crack the case after buying one of the stolen pills from the accused robber. It gave law enforcement the evidence they needed to secure a search warrant for DeWitt's home, where he barricaded himself inside for several hours as officers surrounded the residence. In a frenzied attempt to hide the painkillers, DeWitt and Lillo stashed the pills into a Kool-Aid container. DeWitt put the container in his rectum, and the contraband went undetected until after he had been booked into the Huron County Jail. By the time the drugs were discovered, he had shared some pills that had fallen out of their hiding place with fellow inmates. The rest of the tablets had to be removed. 3 months after the robbery, DeWitt pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery, possession of oxycodone, conveyance of contraband into a detention facility, and tampering with evidence. The state agreed to drop the remaining robbery-related charges, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Lillo took her case to trial in hopes that a sympathetic jury would accommodate her claim that she was suffering from battered woman syndrome at the time of the robbery. She was convicted on all 6 of her original charges, including complicity to commit aggravated robbery, complicity to commit robbery, complicity to commit theft, possession of oxycodone, and tampering with evidence, and was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Number 11. Patrick and Ernestine Preville, On what began as an uneventful afternoon in February of 2020, a man later identified by police as 29-year-old Patrick Preble entered a luxury jewelry store in Hudson Yards, New York, wearing a burqa and asked to see a $21,000 necklace. As the employee went to retrieve the necklace, he noticed that Patrick was clutching one of the store's watches. When the worker began to ask questions, the suspect pulled out a spray bottle and sprayed water at his face, then snatched the necklace and fled the scene. Patrick was also accused of stealing 2 watches valued at $64,000 and $715,000. In addition to wearing a burqa to cover his face, he disguised his voice, according to police. Law enforcement revealed that the suspect's 29-year-old wife, Ernestine, was present at the time of the robbery, but they did not specify whether she was inside the store. A few weeks later, authorities arrested the couple at their home in Brooklyn's Canarsie neighborhood. All of the stolen jewelry was recovered, and the pair were charged with grand larceny. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 10. James Reborn and Emily Browning in January of 2024. A suspect, later identified as 27-year-old James Reborn, entered a Truist Bank branch in Roswell, Georgia, and handed a teller a note claiming that he had a gun and demanding money. By the time police arrived, he had fled the scene, but investigators were able to identify Reborn as the suspect using surveillance footage and other resources. The day after the robbery, Reborn's vehicle was detected by license plate readers, prompting police to respond to the area in search of the wanted fugitive, who was considered armed and dangerous. During the chase that ensued, Reborn abandoned his vehicle and fled on foot. Inside the car, officers found a 29-year-old woman named Emily Browning, who was charged with armed robbery in connection with the bank heist. For the time being, Reborn managed to evade law enforcement. The following day, police discovered that he had used his cell phone on a property where they found an outbuilding that contained evidence of recent occupation. During a search of the area, a nearby homeowner, Gwyn Ketchum, found Reborn sleeping on the floor of her husband's home office. Thankfully, the police were nearby, and the accused bank robber was swiftly taken into custody on suspicion of armed robbery, criminal trespass, and multiple traffic offenses. Ketchum later told local station WSB-TV that she heard a noise coming from her husband's office after she went to bed. Thinking it was one of her cats, she went to open the door only to discover that it was barricaded from the inside. As soon as she pushed the door open and saw Reborn's legs, she immediately exited the house and alerted law enforcement. Although Ketchum didn't think Reborn was at the house to hurt her, she was clearly alarmed by the discovery, as she explained how he was in her house for 5 hours before she noticed his presence. The cases against Browning and Reborn appear to be ongoing. Number 9. Christopher Allen Morris and Lauren Michelle Field. In May of 2020, a Georgia man was robbed at gunpoint after agreeing to pay someone he met on the internet for intimacy. According to court documents, 19-year-olds Christopher Allen Morris and Lauren Michelle Field lured the victim to a location about a mile from his home in Kennesaw using Snapchat. Upon arriving at the meeting point, the victim was met by Morris and an unknown black male. Morris allegedly pointed a gun at the victim's chest, then struck him over the head with the weapon and cleaned his wallet of nearly $200 in cash. He was also accused of snapping photos of the man's credit cards while saying that he was Field's man. During questioning, Field reportedly denied knowing the other suspect involved in the attack, despite admitting that she had overheard him and Morris discussing their plan to assault and rob the victim. She also told investigators that Morris had previously arranged for her to meet up with men, but it's unclear whether those encounters ended in robberies. Morris and Field were booked into custody and held without bail on suspicion of armed robbery, aggravated assault and battery. Records show that Morris is serving a 10-year prison sentence for armed robbery with a projected release date in January of 2027. The outcome of Field's case is unclear. Number 8. Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Allen Steinker. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in April of 2006, 42-year-old Mark Richardson, his wife, 48-year-old Deborah Richardson, and their son were found stabbed to death inside their home in Medicine Hat, Alberta. The Canadian couple's preteen daughter, Jasmine, was absent from the scene, leading to initial fears that she was also a victim. and had possibly been kidnapped. But it wasn't long before investigators began to suspect Jasmine and her much older boyfriend, 23-year-old Jeremy Steinker, of being involved in the triple murder, based on items found in Jasmine's bedroom and school locker. The day after the Richardsons' slain bodies were found, police arrested Jasmine and Steinker roughly 80 miles from the crime scene in Leader, Saskatchewan. They were each charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Emails and other evidence revealed that Steinker had killed Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine most likely murdered her brother. Witnesses told police that the couple had confessed to the murders, but they both pleaded not guilty and took their cases to trial. During Jasmine's trial in 2007, she admitted that she had hypothetical conversations about killing her family, but she claimed that there was no real intent behind the discussions. She was nevertheless found guilty as charged and received the maximum sentence for a youthful offender, which amounted to 6 years of incarceration, followed by 4 years of supervised release. Steinker was also convicted as charged, but received a much heavier sentence of 3 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The accused getaway driver, 19-year-old Casey Lancaster, was charged with being an accessory after the fact and disposing of evidence. She pleaded guilty to a reduced obstruction charge and was sentenced to a year of house arrest. Jasmine was released from lockup in 2016 after undergoing intensive therapy and rehabilitation during her time behind bars. Despite the severity of her crimes, the judge noted that her desire to atone for her actions seemed genuine. She has remained out of news headlines ever since, indicating that she is most likely living a quiet and law-abiding existence. Number 7. Jesse Landry and Alicia Diaz Landry. In December of 2012, 42-year-old Jesse Landry and his wife, 33-year-old Alicia Diaz Landry, were accused of robbing a Keesler Federal Credit Union branch in Diamond Head, Mississippi. Acting on a tip, authorities nabbed the pair about a week later in Bogalusa, Louisiana, at the home of Diaz Landry's mother. Landry and Diaz Landry were extradited to Mississippi to face charges of armed robbery, receiving stolen property, marijuana possession, and possession of drug paraphernalia. In April of 2014, Diaz Landry pleaded guilty to robbery as part of a plea deal. She claimed that her drug addiction had clouded her judgment and admitted that she had gone inside the credit union to scope out its security prior to the crime. In exchange for her testimony against her husband, she received a 15-year prison sentence with 10 years suspended, which meant that she would serve 5 years behind bars for her role in the robbery. Landry's case was about to go to trial when he had a change of heart at the 11th hour and pleaded guilty to robbery. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison with 10 years suspended, amounting to a 15-year term behind bars. Number 6. David and Taylor Benson. In November of 2020, police in Prescott Valley, Arizona, arrested 31-year-old David Benson and his wife, 24-year-old Taylor Benson, on suspicion of robbery and credit card fraud. According to police, Taylor was wanted in connection with the recent daytime robbery of an ATM customer at a local Wells Fargo bank. She fled the scene on foot but was soon identified as a suspect in a separate $11,000 credit card fraud case. Taylor and David were each charged with 1 felony count of fraudulent use of a credit card without consent. Records show that neither of the two are currently incarcerated, leaving the outcome of the case unclear. Number 5. Christopher Mahoney and Jill Cotter. In September of 2023, 44-year-old Christopher Mahoney and 42-year-old Jill Cotter were charged in connection with a recent burglary at the Great Eagle Motel in Hudson, Massachusetts. According to news reports, officers responded to the motel several hours after the crime, where they found evidence of forced entry into one of the rooms. A few hours later, police were called to an abandoned residence across the street from the motel in response to reports of suspicious activity. Officers arrived to find the home locked from the inside. They eventually made their way into the derelict dwelling, where they found Mahoney and Cotter hiding in the basement. The couple were each charged with 2 counts of burglary. Cotter was released without bail pending the outcome of her case, while Mahoney was held on $500 cash bail. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 4. Peter Jenica and Priscilla Pagliaroli. In December of 2018, 26-year-old Peter Jenica and 22-year-old Priscilla Paliaroli were accused of burglarizing a residence in Winslow, Maine, in the middle of the night and assaulting the homeowner. The victim was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, and police began searching for the suspects, who had fled the scene by the time law enforcement arrived. They caught up with Jenica and Paliaroli later that morning and took the pair into custody on suspicion of aggravated assault and robbery. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 3. Sidney Roger and Rochelle Hodges. On an otherwise ordinary Friday night in June of 2012, a Louisiana man was robbed by a woman while playing video poker at a casino in Raceland. According to the Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office, 30-year-old Rochelle Hodges approached the victim and grabbed 3 $10 bills out of his hand, unintentionally ripping the bills in half. She fled the scene in a black convertible driven by 31-year-old Sidney Roger, and the pair were apprehended a short while later. They were each booked into custody on one count of simple robbery, while Roger faced an additional charge for driving with a suspended license. Today's topic was requested by Ember Flair, the Lynn X, and Kai Meraga 6146. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. Antonio Bravo and Diana Pacheco. 3 women in Live Oak and Capitola, California, had their purses stolen at gunpoint on the same day in August of 2015 by a man who was later identified as 20-year-old Antonio Bravo. Police identified Bravo as the suspected thief and his girlfriend, 20-year-old Diana Pacheco, as the accused getaway driver after tracking purchases made with one of the victim's stolen credit cards to a fast food restaurant's drive-thru where the couple and their vehicle were captured on surveillance footage. According to police, Bravo and Pacheco's young son was in the car during the robberies. Pacheco was charged with identity theft and child endangerment, while Bravo faced 2 counts of robbery, identity theft, and child endangerment. If these deranged duos weren't crazy enough for you, then stay tuned till after number 1, because we've got our previous release on when bullying goes wrong coming right up. Number 1. Brock Benoit and Bethany Kendall. On a Monday night in September of 2013, a suspect robbed a Subway restaurant in Bossier City, Louisiana, at gunpoint and fled the scene in a Ford Expedition SUV. Police arrived within minutes of the robbery and caught up with the getaway vehicle shortly thereafter. They arrested 18-year-olds Brock Benoit and Bethany Kendall with armed robbery, and Kendall was later charged with an additional count of armed robbery in connection with a separate hold-up of a Circle K gas station. 2 additional suspects were questioned and released after police determined that they were unaware of Benoit and Kendall's intention to commit the Subway robbery. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 8. Nanette Waldrop. On the morning of September the 14th of 2021, Alabama woman Nanette Waldrop climbed on board a school bus in the city of Center Point. She did so with the purpose of confronting a student whom she suspected of bullying her child. According to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, the 37-year-old woman proceeded to physically assault the child shortly after boarding the bus at about 7 a.m. In the wake of the incident, a video recording of Waldrop's attack emerged on social media. She was consequently taken into police custody on charges of third-degree assault, trespassing on a school bus, and disorderly conduct. The Jefferson County Superintendent publicly called the video disturbing and insisted that the type of brutish behavior exhibited by Waldrop would not be tolerated. Court records indicated that later on the day of her arrest, the woman was released from custody after posting her $10,500 bail. Number 6. Daphne Mellin. In order to confront a purported cyberbully, Long Island resident Daphne Mellin drove her 12-year-old daughter Jade to William Floyd Elementary School in Shirley on a Sunday afternoon in September of 2011. As was later detailed by the Suffolk County Police, 32-year-old Mellin had persuaded Jade to challenge the girl, who'd allegedly been harassing her on Facebook, to a fight at the local school. On the 11th of the month, the 2 young students began fighting each other, with Mellin encouraging her daughter from the sidelines. At some point during the brawl, Mellin herself got involved and helped Jade attack the other child for several minutes Then after the scuffle had ended, the mother allegedly got into an argument with another group of children who'd been watching the incident from afar. One of the spectators had reportedly questioned why Mellin, as a presumably responsible adult, hadn't broken up the fight. The woman retaliated by spitting in the child's face, grabbing them by the hair and attempting to knee them in the head multiple times. The entire ordeal was recorded by a bystander, and although the video was initially posted online, the police later revealed that it had been taken off the internet and seized as evidence in their investigation. Mellin surrendered to the authorities and was charged with 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child and 1 count of attempted assault. Number 5. Veronica Ruiz. At about 3 p.m. on June the 19th of 2019, New Jersey mother Veronica Ruiz was walking her children home from school when she realized that they were being followed by a group of 3 male teenagers. Ruiz's eldest son then told her that they were the same students who'd been bullying him at school in recent days. The teens proceeded to attack the family, striking the bullied boy in the face and knocking his mother to the pavement, causing her to temporarily lose consciousness. Ruiz spent the next 2 days in the hospital after suffering a number of injuries, including a concussion and a fractured eye socket. It later emerged that on the day prior to the vicious attack, Ruiz's son had reported the assailants to school officials for allegedly bullying him. The teen, found to have spearheaded the attack on the Ruiz family, was consequently arrested and charged with assault before being released to the custody of his parents. His victims have publicly accused him of targeting them due to their Mexican heritage, and therefore labeled the attack as a hate crime. Number 4. Jailyn Jones. The body of high school senior Jailyn Jones was found in a shallow creek in Germantown, Maryland, on January the 24th of 2022. The young man, who'd gone missing 3 days earlier, had reportedly sustained multiple stab wounds to the head and torso. A medical examination ultimately determined that his death had been caused by blunt force trauma. After speaking with Jones's friends, investigators learned that he'd gone to see someone named Tay, eventually identified as fellow Northwest High School student Taquan Henderson, on the day of his disappearance. The police obtained a search warrant for Henderson's DNA, which was then linked to DNA present on a pair of boots and jeans that had been found near the body. In May of 2022, Henderson was arrested and formally charged with first-degree murder in connection to Jones's death. As of the latest updates on the case, the police were still actively investigating the incident, and a motive for the killing hadn't been officially established. However, the victim's mother, Alexis McDaniel, alleged that her son's death was directly related to bullying he'd been experiencing at school. The woman reportedly came upon a social media account that mocked her son's homicide in a post that described him as a snitch. Although McDaniel claimed that Jones had been killed because he reported his harassment to school officials, the Montgomery County School District was unable to publicly comment on the bullying allegations due to rules pertaining to student privacy. The preliminary court hearing pertaining to Henderson's murder charge was scheduled for May the 27th of 2022. Number 3. Michael Hyler. On October the 4th of 2021, Englishman Michael Hyler was arrested by Nottinghamshire police in connection to his repeated assault and intimidation of an unidentified woman. It was reported that in April of that year, 45-year-old Hyler had punched a victim in the face during one altercation and then strangled her in another violent incident a few months later. In addition to his physical attacks, the man was also accused of downloading tracking apps to the woman's cell phone, destroying her passport, and planting hidden cameras in her home to spy on her. Hyler was taken into custody after the police had been notified of his relentless harassment, and he then faced criminal charges of controlling and coercive behavior, assault by beating, and causing actual bodily harm. Only 20 minutes after his subsequent release, the man was reportedly found to have violated the conditions of his bail agreement by contacting and harassing the woman on social media. During a hearing in Nottingham Crown Court held on May the 18th of 2022, Detective Constable Ella Redfern of the Nottinghamshire Police labeled Hyler a violent and controlling bully and called his physical and emotional abuse against the victim deliberate and frightening. He ultimately pleaded guilty to his charges and was consequently jailed for 3 years. Number 2. Brianna Broku. A student at the University of Hartford in Connecticut was arrested in October of 2017 for launching a calculated campaign of bullying towards her roommate over the course of several weeks. In the days following 18-year-old Brianna Broku's arrest, news of her abhorrent behavior circulated internationally, largely due to the seemingly racial nature of her harassment of Jazzy Rowe, her African-American roommate. Subsequent reports detailed how Broku had boasted about her misdeeds on social media, laying out the details surrounding them as though they were a point of pride for her. In an Instagram post, she'd openly admitted to a multitude of offenses, including putting moldy clam dip in Rowe's lotion, wiping bodily fluids on her plates and utensils, and rubbing used tampons on her belongings. Broku's systematic bullying ultimately prompted Rowe to move out of their shared living space, which the former celebrated on social media, saying, "I can finally say goodbye to Jamaican Barbie." In a lengthy Facebook Live post, Rowe detailed the extent of the harm her roommate had caused, explaining how she'd become increasingly ill. Because of Broku's repugnant actions, she'd begun to suffer severe throat pain that caused her to lose her voice. Upon her arrest, Broku was charged with breach of peace and criminal mischief, but the NAACP proposed that she also face hate crime charges, alleging that she'd targeted Rowe specifically because of her race. Broku ultimately avoided being charged with the latter, and she was ordered to enter an accelerated rehabilitation program in 2018 after being sentenced to probation. Number 1. Thomas Brown. A father from Wichita Falls, Texas, was taken into police custody on January the 27th of 2022 for allegedly pulling a knife on a group of high school students. The suspect, identified as Thomas Brown, had reportedly been told by his daughter that she was frequently bullied by some of her female classmates. According to an arrest affidavit, Brown subsequently got in contact with the school principal to notify them of the situation. Rather than allow the issue to be resolved through the proper channels, however, the man decided to enact his own brand of justice. On the day of the incident, Brown received a phone call from his daughter, who claimed that her alleged bullies were chasing her. She reportedly asked her father to meet them at an intersection near the high school's parking lot. Upon his arrival, Brown approached a group of girls and threatened to slit their throats if they touched his daughter. One of the alleged bullies then expressed her doubts towards the legitimacy of the man's threat, at which point he reportedly brandished a pocket knife and held the blade approximately 6 inches from the girl's neck. Local police received multiple calls about the altercation, and when officers arrived at the scene to investigate, Brown spoke freely with them about what had happened, even going so far as to physically reenact the incident for them. He was booked into the Wichita County Jail on a charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Brown was released on a $10,000 bond while awaiting the commencement of the case's legal proceedings. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be in a relationship with a kleptomaniac or with a chain smoker? Let us know in the comments section below.